Hello and welcome to this first session of the BA and Beyond Brussels event about being a business advisor. I think that's one of the things that you learn as a BA fairly early on is that you typically do not make business decisions. You offer options, you do some analysis to see what options are interesting and which are maybe less interesting, more expensive. Just a moment, I get a call from somewhere. Sorry about that. So being an advisor is definitely something that is valuable and relevant for all BAs. But the question is, how do you become an advisor and how do you become a trusted advisor? Because just saying something what you think doesn't necessarily mean that people will trust your advice. And at the same time, as a BA, you're also supposed to be challenging people. So how do you do that? How do you combine being trusted with being someone who challenges things? Those are exactly the topics that Ravi and Robert will be sharing with us today in this session. So welcome Ravi and Robert. And Ravi, we will start with your session. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Philip, and thank you everyone joining this session. So yes, I'm going to talk you through this on this topic and hope it makes sense to you as a business analyst, whether we are a trusted advisor or how we can earn that status. Just as an introduction, first and foremost, I'd like to make clear that I am here in my personal capacity as a business analyst, and I'm not representing here as a vice president of Wells Fargo. That's kind of I need to state before I talk. So it is as a business analyst I'm talking here, and just to a bit more background about me. I have been kind of a student of business analyst for last more than 15 years, and have been different part of the world working across, and so that's all about me. I quickly move on to. So if I just press the button to move on, is it? Sorry. Yeah. So I take you through a bit of quoting my little bit my personal journey as well, and also those key points already Philip alluded to, that focus on how we understand about trusted advisor, how we develop the trust, what are the key factors there, and how we are seeing a business analyst in the shoe of trusted advisor. And just the background why I chose this topic. It is quite interesting that in 2010 I moved to UK from Ireland, and it was a totally different market for me. It's totally new ground for me to work, and I started my independent consultancy. I started looking for assignment with different clients. Particularly, I was having a banking experience, so I was looking for top 4 or 5 banks over there. And it was quite challenging for me because coming straight into a new country, you don't know, you don't have any recommendation, you don't have any local network. And those challenges where I got fascinated about, I start reading about how to become a good consultant, how I can regain the trust from client to customer, how I can repeat my business, so all those things in 2010 till like a few years, really. I was struggling on those fronts where I had to challenge. I had to compete with not only people from organization like well-known consulting firm, and also people who have established themselves in UK market as an independent consultant. So that challenges was the background where I'm coming from. I hope that makes sense. So question for you here, and just before I start, I'd like you think about in your life, personal or professional life, can you think about somebody who you can go out and ask for advice without any hesitation, where you can tell anything and open your mind, and you really trust it? So everybody must have experience, in life, whether it's childhood or during a student life or in career life or in a personal life. Also, if you can think about, do you have example where someone have been trusting you and coming to you anytime, even in middle of night, calling you and asking, I need advice, and that fellow or person, individual is kind of a, heart and soul and can talk to you without any difficulty, anything, any risk? So just giving, like, if you think about that, will help to you recollect and understanding of advisor and being trusted advisor. If you have any question, please do write in the chat box. I think chat box would be working for you guys. And if question get answered throughout the talk, well and good. Otherwise, I will certainly spend time to explain or answer your question based on my knowledge. So on this topic, when I started preparing, I thought, why not I go around, do some interview and for some people from different walk of life. So what I did is I sent out to around 50, 60 emails to 50, 60 people to to do a short written interview. And then when I got a response, then I call them and understand their perspective. So what I'm going to show you few slides is the perspective I have gathered from different people from different walk of life. So giving the understanding what they think about trusted advisor and how they think that you can be a better advisor and ultimately a trusted one for your client or customer. So here you go, the first one. This perspective comes from James Anthony Sharkey. He is a former diplomat for Irish government. He has been in the business of giving advice not only on foreign policy, but many other policies for his government. So I will pause around for 10 seconds so you can scan through what James has to say about trusted advisor. And you see the green going up and red going down. That means the green side things help you build more trust and moving towards in the right direction, where the red side of things, if those things you are struggling with, that's certainly going to drag down. So I pause for 10 seconds so that you understand what James has to say. And you can see that quite interesting fact James has outlined, particularly your understanding, empathy, or your listening ability. On other side, if you're lacking discretion, you are not very serious about your conversation, if you're showing kind of a casual, those things work against that. Also, like mentioned that I had I was fortunate to come in contact with, just like coincidentally, when I moved in Ireland 2001, and after a few years I met him once, and then somehow I keep connecting with him one or twice. Many times I met him. So I seek him advice on some certain topics and things. So that's the James, what he's talking about, a diploma talking about trusted advisor. The next one here, you have a perspective from a scientist and social entrepreneur. Gyanesh Pandey, he has lived in many countries. He studied with me in university in India, then he moved in USA, where he did his PhD and master and worked there, then moved India. He started Husk power company, generating power from the rice husk, and then he again went back to become a scientist. So I pause again for 10 seconds so that you can see what Gyanesh has to say here. And Gyanesh has been doing both things. At the moment, he again moved back India. He is starting some new, doing some sort of a venture, a startup he's working on. But he has been on an advisory board for many state government and central ministry government for India, particularly related to power. And he, when I was talking to him, he also mentioned that when he was running his company Husk Power, he had to depend on many experts and advisors. He had to deal with hundreds of people around for different things, for compliance, for some regulatory information or some subject matter expertise. So he has been both side of things, looking for advice and giving advice. So certainly his point of view does stand a ground. And particularly one point I like when he said that trying to bring their own value system in advising clients, that may become a detrimental. As you know, most of the time, the organization are very proud of their value system. Like they are very, display their value system, their values and expectation on their wall and things. And if you go there, rather than solving the problem. If you're trying to change their value system, that's certainly going to not work for you. So unless you got a mandate to change the value system, otherwise just try to fit into the environment the best way to go and work and solve the problem. Moving next, here you go, a perspective from a well-known business analyst leader in UK, Ian Richard. He has been, I have been knowing him almost a decade now. He's a well-known speaker over there, and that's here his perspective, what he has to say about trusted advisor and what can work and what can be detrimental to gaining that status. So I pause again for 10 seconds for you guys to look into this. And I do see that quite pertinent things he has highlighted about being, you should not be, you need to understand other perspective. Other people need to understand that they have been heard, like, you're not imposing your point of view. So how much listening and empathy you need to show in building that rapport and people start trusting you. So that's from Ian. And on the last one I'm going to present you, this is Charlie H. Green. He's a well-known author of the book, The Trusted Advisor. I think one more book he has written. He has been in this business of talking on this particular subject for more than a decade. I don't know Charlie personally, but I did reach out to him. I read his book. I did reach out to him for his permission to quote the trust equation and to quote his, also ask him his perspective. So he wrote me back that what is the definition he sent me through email. So it was quite I'm thankful to him that even he didn't know me, but he allowed me to use his equation and what he has to say. So again, I pause for 10 seconds so that you can see what Charlie has to say about Trusted Advisor and what things can work for you if you want to gain trust for your client or customer. I will spend a few minutes here, particularly talking through of this trust equation, where Charlie is saying, as long as credibility, reliability, and intimacy go up, and as long as you control your self-orientation, don't let it go higher, you are on the right path and gaining that trusted, moving on in a deeper in your trusted relationship with your client or customer. Quickly go one by one. Credibility, that's where it is more about the word oriented. What it means, it's more about your qualification, your expertise, your experience, your presence, how you deal with people, how you talk to people. So it's kind of also your reputation and personality, like, well-known doctor in the city, or, well-known speaker. For example, like if a doctor today, a stand-up, a well-known doctor talk about coronavirus, you will certainly going to listen to him. He's more credible rather than comparing suppose a politician talking about. And what makes difference? If both if saying the same thing, you won't believe the politician, but you do tend to believe the doctor because their experience and the area of expertise they have. So that's bring the credibility as a business analyst. If I'm going to an organization, they will trust me. If I have a experience of being business analysis, if I have a well-known certification, well-known education about business analysis, people will find me credible. So that has to be given thing. You have to be there. Credibility element has to be there, even if you go there going inside any client or customer. Reliability comes where your action and your promise delivery. So as long as you keep doing that, it will help you grow the trust. Whatever I talk, I'm best known and have lots of knowledge about business analysis or whatever area of concern I'm working. But if I don't deliver, if I just keep talking, and people won't, rely on me, and they at the end of the day, client or customer need a delivery. They need a solution of their problem. And so, as long as we consistently delivering the promise, meeting their expectation, exceeding their expectation, and kind of consistency is maintained, that's where reliability comes from. That has an action orientation, what you do, and that's kind of thing. So if for example, if you are like a very credible doctor, and if you go and meet, and if doctor is not entertaining you, they're canceling their your appointment, it's not reliable. Even though, even if you are a very kind of a well-known and one of the topmost credible person, but reliability comes with interaction, individual interaction. So that's where reliability, and that both things, credibility, reliability, make you more professional. In professional life, you always try to be credible, be reliable, and those. So now, next two things: intimacy and self-orientation, which takes you relationship with your client or customer from a professional relationship to a trust-based relationship. Because these days we don't even talk to some of the client or customer, we deliver stuff. So we are in the credibility reliability world. As long as clients see us reliable, credible, our work delivery, our quality delivery, we have a very good professional relationship. But if we don't deal with client face-to-face talk, then our relationship is just a professional relationship. It's not going to be that kind of a personal trust-based relationship. So intimacy comes from that angle, is an emotional angle where you have a no more a stranger with your client or customer. And this is where you ensuring the client becomes so comfortable talking to you, any difficult problem, and the client becomes so comfortable that they can call you anytime any problem happen. You becoming a kind of a first point of contact for your client, for firefighting of the problem, or thinking through different options, whatever we working. And if you are feeling that stage, that means your intimacy level is high. You have kind of a developed that intimate relationship. When I was working with Barclays one, so initially, like they were very trusting me what I'm delivering. Okay, give me that report. Can you send out this information, and can you give me quick option and design? But I was feeling in early days that client was not trusting enough to open up what actually the problem they're solving, high level, what going on in that client's world, upper side of the level. And it took me time to that relationship where they start involving me, getting me in those kind of a discussion, which I normally don't use to attend. I was just being asked, okay, today, can you give me that? We have a meeting with that particular group and that particular vendors. And now, after certain times, when the clients see me that you are reliable, credible, delivering, and with my intention also trying to understand, trying to ask the right question to the client, they eventually I find myself that I am going with the client and dealing with the vendor. So that kind of intimacy you develop, and it will happen. Now, last one. Sorry, please do tell me the time also, because so how many, every 10 minutes, if you can tell me. Self-orientation is about not about greed, but it is about, you should not be focused on just yourself. Like when I'm dealing with client problem, anything doing with, if I'm just concentrating myself, whether I'm looking intelligent, whether I'm making a good impression, or what happened to my career, about what if things doesn't work, what's going to happen. So if I'm preoccupied with my own problem and issues, and not concentrating on the client issues, client problem, that the client will sense it, and they will find it. May not tell you, they will find it. This person is quite self-oriented, is more worried about his. So that's where we tend to do that. But that's where, if you don't, you leave aside your personal issues and things, just honestly, if you are focusing on how best I could help solving the problem, designing the solution, or defining the problem, or investigating, and it will come from, if you are that mindset, the client will understand that yes, he is focused. Even if you do mistake and understanding it, they will understand. So that's a quite important thing. So I move on. I think I have talked more.
Okay, so it seems we're experiencing a network problem on Ravi's side. Let's just give it a few seconds to see if he can get it solved. In the meantime, if you have any questions about trusted advisor and how you can become a trusted advisor, or if you have any experience to share yourself, it's also very interesting for others to see what helps you in becoming trusted, in gaining trust from your stakeholders, then please feel free to share them in the chat. So we'll just give it a few seconds to see if Ravi can come back to the live stream, and if not, we can move to Robert's presentation, of course. Okay, Patrick, do you see Ravi coming into the studio again?
No, he's gone.
Okay, then I suggest that we move to Robert's presentation, and then we will try to get a hold of Ravi again so that he can finalize his talk and answer your questions at the end of the session. Robert, you can turn on your camera and the floor is yours.
Very good. Sorry about that bit of a glitch, as we were discussing before. It's typical of the Zoom meetings that they come and they go, I suppose. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. But you're seeing the full display, right?
Yep, it's okay.
Okay, very good. So thanks again for having me on. Always a pleasure to talk to BAs, and especially on this topic of devil's advocacy, which is the subject today. And before I start, I just want to give a little bit of a background on myself. I am currently a consultant in North Carolina, business consultant. As you can see from these bullet points here, I've had a variety of experiences over the years, product and marketing management, new product development and launch, business analysis and strategy. Most of this has been in the medical device industry, primarily in what are called Class 2 medical devices, like the vital signs monitor you see on the screen there. And some of the companies you may know, Philips Healthcare, for example, or Laerdal Medical. I've worked for a variety of small companies also. And I'm currently a mentor in what's called the NSFI Core program. This is a government program that helps primarily academics get concepts commercialized, although it's now involved some other small startups. And I've done instruction in critical thinking, and I've written a book on devil's advocacy. As you can see in my background, I've had a variety of training and certificates along the way, Prince 2 practitioner, business analytics, and other certificates. But what you don't see on there is any reference to the business analyst title. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, why am I addressing this group today? Why am I addressing business analyst if I've never had that official title? And you'll recall that according to the IBA, business analyst is any person who performs business analysis. Doesn't matter what their job title or organizational role may be. And as you can see from the IBA hub and spoke diagram on the right, that there are all kinds of business analysts that are out there, even though they don't have that title. And I've indicated with those red circles some of the roles that I've held along the way. So my perspective comes from being a product manager, portfolio manager, and the like, but also someone who has done business analysis over the years. Today, I'm going to be focusing on 3 key topics. These are expanded in the book that I referred to earlier, that you see on the right-hand side there. But the 3 focus areas I'm going to be talking about today is the origin of devil's advocacy and how that led to modern devil's advocacy, why we need to subject our formal processes and best practices to challenge analysis, like modern devil's advocacy, and how our daily practice of modern devil's advocacy may help improve business analysis throughout an organization. I also believe that this practice can help us in our personal lives too, but the focus today will be more on the business aspects of the practice. So just to give a very brief history of devil's advocacy, early references can be found in the Catholic Church at the end of the 14th century. The practice was institutionalized by the church a couple of hundred years afterwards. It was intended to control saint making by local parishes by way of a more uniform method of investigation at the Vatican. Essentially, the Pope decided that there were just too many parishes coming up with their own saints, and they had to get this under control. They had to have some means to know the people who they were acknowledging had these saintly qualities actually had these qualities, right? So they did this by establishing a trial format where there was a prosecutor who had the official title of the promoter of the faith. And the role of this party was to argue against the case of someone who was being offered up as a saintly person. But because the promoter of the faith, the prosecutor, was working against that person, they were also called the devil's advocate. They were working on behalf of the devil, essentially. It's interesting to note that there have been changes. This was going on for many centuries, but there were changes in the 1980s during the papacy of John Paul II. In 1983, there were revisions to the way that this process worked. And the role of the devil's advocate was essentially, if not eliminated, reduced substantially. And it so happened that after 1983, John Paul II canonized more saints in his less than 30-year time as Pope than did all the popes from the previous 500 years combined. So I'm not saying the quality of canonization was reduced, but it is interesting that once this devil's advocacy role was removed, where the person was being, prosecutor was challenging these individual candidates, there did seem to be a significant rise in the number of people who are making it through the canonization process. So that brings us to what you might call modern devil's advocacy. And what we see here is its definition from this book, Structured Analytic Techniques. These gentlemen who wrote this book are former CA intelligence analysts. So they've developed techniques, they've had analyze tricky situations, and they train other people how to do it. And they define it as a type of challenge analysis for critiquing a proposed judgment, plan, or decision. It's usually done by a single analyst who was not previously involved in the deliberations. So they're independent of those original deliberations. The advocate is charged with challenging the proposed judgment by building the strongest possible case against it, much like the original devil's advocates did. It's important to note that there's no prescribed procedure. This is not yet another formal process or best practice. It's really very open-ended. It's up to the devil's advocate to decide how they're going to approach the case. And it's certainly not about playing. A lot of times when you read about this in the popular press, they refer to it as playing devil's advocate. But it's really not about playing. It's a serious method that can be used for judgment analysis. Characteristics of a good analytic thinker, according to the authors of that book I just showed you, which I believe are also good for a good devil's advocate, is to challenge key assumptions, to consider alternative explanations of hypotheses, to look for inconsistent data that would justify discarding a hypothesis early, to focus on key drivers, which is really, considering systems thinking about the way you're looking at problems, and to keep context in mind, which means how are you as the advocate going to best serve the client? And it has nothing to do with your age, your gender, where you are in the org chart. Just like a business analyst, anybody who engages in modern devil's advocacy is a modern devil's advocate. So at this point, you may be hearing what I'm saying about these different features and saying, well, look, we business analysts, aren't we already modern devil's advocates? And I would say, well, you may be, But there's several key challenges that make this a difficult process. One of them is this popular idea of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which you may have heard about. This was coined by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger back in 1999. They identified it as a cognitive bias where we're unable to recognize our own incompetence. And not only do we not recognize that we're incompetent, but we think that we're much better at something than we actually are. And if you look at the graph on the right-hand side, you'll see this is a reproduction of their data. The subjects were given a test. There was a score on the test, and then they were asked how they thought they did. As you can see, people at the left were the poorest performers, and people at the right were the highest. And people who didn't really have the competency thought they did much better than they did. And this worked its way all the way up through the different quartiles until you get to the most competent people on the right. And you notice there's a crossover, which suggests that people who are very competent know that they don't know everything. And so they are suspicious of their own knowledge level. And that was an interesting twist. But an important reminder that one of the researchers, David Dunning, points out is that the first rule of the Dunning-Kruger Club is that you don't know you're a member of the Dunning-Kruger Club. It affects everybody. All of us are affected by this. So if you take a look at how well do professionals actually make judgments in the real world, you can find a variety of troubling surveys and reports. This is one that was reported by McKinsey and Company. And what they did was they interviewed over 2,200 executives about their strategic decisions and that their firms conducted. And what they found was that mergers routinely fail to deliver the expected synergies, that strategic plans often ignore competitive responses, that large investment projects are over budget time and again, and the cognitive biases affect the most important strategic decisions. And it doesn't matter how smart the people are or how well rated the company is. This is something that happens regularly, that companies are constantly struggling to just make better decisions. So a question I have for the audience is, how many of you have worked at a company or are working at a company that conducts annual training in critical thinking and decision-making? My own experience has been that this is very rare. Generally, companies will do things like conduct fire drills, right? The city requires you to conduct fire drills and make sure you can get out of the building fast enough. Companies typically have annual meetings where they're doing planning of some type. But when it comes down to actually ensuring that the employees are getting good critical thinking and decision-making skills, that doesn't seem to be something that's regularly conducted at many companies. So one of the questions that comes to mind when I consider this is, might there be poor pre-workforce training that continues to contribute to poor professional decision-making skills? And there is some evidence that this may be the case. Here, for example, is an evaluation. It's called the CLA Plus. And this attempts to evaluate the decision-making of college-level students. As you can see from the graph on the right-hand side, there is a difference between freshmen and seniors, right? This test is not taking a look at subject area knowledge, but how well the students are on elements like critical thinking, analytical reasoning, and such. And so there is a difference between the freshman and senior classes. However, even the senior class who is leaving and going into the workforce, in this case, indicated that 40% of the seniors were unable to distinguish the quality of evidence in building an argument. And in another unrelated survey of 400 companies, respondents rated recent college graduates, 44% of them, as poorly or not at all prepared with these critical judgment-making skills. So then a question I have for the audience is, how many of you attended a college that had a required course in critical thinking and decision-making? Again, from what I've seen, and I've interacted with local colleges in the area, there generally aren't formal courses that are a requirement in the education. And so I think what oftentimes happens is people, especially in the engineering and science areas, think, well, it's part of what we learned. It may not be called out as a separate course, but we know what we're doing. We're trained how to do these thinking and the analytical aspects. And so maybe if there was more of that kind of training, there'd be more better critical thinking skills in the workforce. Well, here's an example of another paper. This was published by 2 instructors at the college level who are putting together a critical thinking course for engineering students at the collegiate level. And what they observed was that engineering and science training can actually discourage critical thinking skills. This may seem counterintuitive, but it could be because students are presented with only well-established theories and best practices. Technical courses always provide positive evidence, and so the student is trained to expect such evidence in the problems that they're going to be solving. And the evidence is presented authoritatively. Students are told this is a fact. They're not required to uncover these facts through critical thinking skills. And taking a look at the diagram on the right, this is sort of what happens in most science classes, right? Students show up. They're all given the same chemicals and beakers and Bunsen burners and the like, and they're told, follow this course of action, and this is the outcome you will get. And if you don't get that outcome, no one's going to consider giving you a Nobel Prize because you've discovered something new. They're going to tell you, you made a mistake. You didn't follow the instructions properly, or you mismeasured something, because this prescriptive training tells you do these stepwise things to arrive at this positive end. So then this leads me to consider maybe this kind of prescriptive training transfers these potential pitfalls of not using critical thinking skills into other process-driven environments. So here's another paper. This is done on causal complexity in projects that was conducted, where they looked at a variety of projects to see how well can you manage the cause and effect relationships as the complexity increases. And what they found was that these prescriptive paradigms emphasize process control. And in the cases, the goals are predetermined, the objectives are clear, the sequence of activities is pre-scheduled. Again, this sounds much like a science class, right? As opposed to teachers and students, there's managers and stakeholders. The managers are accountable for any deviation. And these prescriptive diagrams, however, are lacking in certain projects that involve fuzzy mission and goals, objectives that are not clearly rooted in a fixed reality, and where solutions need time to emerge within complex and emergent social processes. And I think you may agree that many of the projects you're involved in, what appears to be the case when you first start turns not to be the case. And as you're trying to solve this problem that you think you're trying to solve, there are other things happening in the background that might be changing the goalposts, right? So this same kind of prescriptive process that we see in our educational systems, stepwise learning, is an attempt is made to use it in the workforce setting, and it may have equally negative effects. So then the question I have is, can these prescriptive processes that we use in business analysis create a false sense of certitude and unrealistic expectations? And I think the answer is yes. This slide is used to show an analogy by Annie Duke, who is the author of a popular book called Thinking in Bets. Annie is a former successful poker player, and she's now a consultant to companies to try to help them understand, how do you manage risk in the business world. And in her analogy, she compares the game of chess, which you see on the left, to the game of poker, which you see on the right. And in the game of chess, it is very much skill-based, right? All the pieces are on the board. Everybody can see what's on the board. Pieces don't magically disappear and then reappear later in the game. And so the winner of the game is very often going to be the person who has the highest skill, because there's really not much luck involved in the game of chess. By comparison, the game of poker is chance-based. It's skill, but it's also chance-based. So the good poker players can sort of guess what the likelihood is that the cards they're holding might win based on other things that they see, but they don't know the cards that the other players are holding. They don't know the next cards that are going to be thrown. And so they're goal is not to come up with the right answer all the time. Rather, their goal is to come up with a reasonable bet that they have a good chance of winning a particular hand, but they don't want to lose everything. They don't want to find themselves in an all-in bet where they lose everything and then they can no longer play the game. And so they're really sort of balancing the uncertainty of the world that they're dealing in order to make sure that overall they're getting the best overall outcomes. So on the left, we see what I think is a good analogy for a prescriptive process. The way that we're taught as children, the way that we're trained as analysts and the like, is that if you follow these steps, it's reliably deterministic. Everything will turn out fine in the end. But what we're actually dealing with is a game of poker, which is resistance to prescriptive processes, where there's probabilities, where there's uncertainty, and where these prescriptive processes that we may learn and may have been trained in might not always be very useful. So our real world challenge looks something like this. We tend to be facing a nonlinear systems environment, right? It includes a lot of issues, both technical and human factors. We can't know all of the elements of the entire system, right? It's just generally too big. And so based on what the particular problem is believed to be, or based on time and resources, we tend to focus on just one area, and that's represented by that narrow gray cone of vision. And as a consequence of this, our field of vision, what we're taking a look at, excludes a lot of elements, some that are critical, shown in red there. They might be out of our field of vision, or they might be hidden by something else that we're looking at in the local environment. So when we are approaching these kinds of problems, we are processing the information with two different kinds of thinking, so-called system one thinking and system two thinking. System one thinking is kind of the automatic reflexive thinking that we have. It's when you see something and you come to a quick conclusion about it. The system two thinking is deliberative. It's the rational thinking you do when you try to calculate something, or when you use one of the various processes or best practices that you may have been trained in. But in either case, in both cases, I should say, of system one and system two thinking, it's going through our brain, of course, which is distorted by our own bias and fallacy. And I list here some of the more popular, or I should say impactful, bias and fallacy that I think we run into. There was, by one account, something in excess of 225 different forms of bias and fallacy that affect us in our judgment making. But these kinds of ones that I put in the top, these tend to be pretty common from my experience. So for example, confirmation bias, where you tend to accept information that supports what you already believe, and you tend to easily dismiss anything that goes against the way that you believe. Or survivorship bias, where because over the course of many past instances, you see certain successes, and so you assume that everything will go in that direction. And that's because you don't know all of the failures that were achieved under the same conditions, right? So again, it gets back to this idea about how strong or how useful is a prescriptive process or best practice at any given time. So in the real world challenge, what we end up doing is we're facing a very complex system with a somewhat narrow view, generally time constrained and resources constrained, and process it into a very simplified model that we and our associates can manage. And oftentimes, this complex system is reduced into a simple cause and effect relationships, which may or may not exist. We may not have enough time to actually know with certitude that this particular facet over here is changing something over here. However, we may have very high confidence based on the fact that we're using processes, best practices, mental models, and the like. And so our experience, our bias, our belief, all of these things interact to give us a sense of certitude that we have very high confidence that things are going to turn out just fine, when in fact they may not. And here's where devil's advocacy, I think, can be a particularly powerful tool to use. So the devil's advocate, again, bringing in this party who is an independent resource, who's not going to look at the problem the same way as you. They're going to be taking a different view. They're going to be looking not only what you're looking at, but they may be opening the vision a little bit more to include some things that you may not have been able to see yourself. And then with this information, they're going to take a look at the output that you've generated, the cause and effect relationships, the hypotheses, the assumptions, and the like that you've made. And they're going to be challenging what your judgment was. So it's an independent perspective to sort of push you a little bit off balance to see if you really have thought through this thing, if there's another interpretation of what you're looking at. Now, it's important to remember that the devil's advocate is also human. Devil's advocate will have their own biases, and they'll make fallacious decisions themselves. The point, however, is not to come up with the one right decision. Just like any business analyst, your role isn't really to say, here's what you ought to be doing. It's really as devil's advocate to say, does this really make sense? You know, you're making this assumption here. What's the evidence for that assumption? You know, you've made this judgment here. Why do you believe that? And so that's the real role of the devil's advocate and what the process brings to any kind of a judgment that's been made. The other thing, I think this gets back to the very first diagram, one of the early diagrams, is if you step back and take a look at the network of folks that you're working with as fellow business analysts throughout an organization, there's an opportunity here to start working more closely with people who have a like-minded usefulness in this challenge analysis. So the more people that you can bring together to have this sort of informed skeptical perspective about challenging judgment in the organization, I feel the better the opportunity for judgments to be challenged on a more regular basis. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. I'm not suggesting that people should suddenly start to call themselves devil's advocates or refer to other people as such. But there's an opportunity to find people within the organization who may not be official business analysts, but who have strong analytical skills, and to be able to say, look, here's something I'd like you to take a look at, tell me what the thoughts are, and to do the same for them. And by doing that, to start to have this interconnected informal web that you see that gives the organization a better way to take a look at the decisions that are being made on a day-to-day basis. So there are some takeaway challenges that I'm proposing to you this morning. The one is to practice the behaviors of a modern devil's advocate daily. And these include some things like curiosity and skepticism, uncertainty, self-critical, open to diverse views, all those things I discussed earlier. To next demonstrate to others by example the benefits of modern devil's advocacy. And I'm not recommending that anybody start preaching this in the organization, but to just show by example, to bring up examples that you've witnessed others do and to say, look, I think this was beneficial for the following reasons. And then lastly, to encourage others in our networks to embrace the behaviors and daily practice of the modern devil's advocate, as I showed in that prior slide, to try to form these informal networks where you can lean on people and ask them to sort of test judgments, yours and other people's judgments within the organization. And finally, to help provide some additional information to you, I've created a resources page. If you go to this link at the top here, you'll be asked to enter a passcode, and the passcode is enter beyond. That's a capital E, a capital B, and there's no space in between. And that will open the page that you see in the right here. And it includes a variety of reading resources. It includes some exercises you can try to conduct and the like. I'm also making available during the this week the book that I've written. It's available on both the Amazon UK site, it's currently ongoing, and it will be available on Amazon.com starting tomorrow. There's a little bit of a glitch that I had to resolve, but through this coming Sunday, the book will be available at a deep discount. And then last but not least, if there are questions or if you have a disagreement with anything that I've said or anything that you read, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. You can do so by the contact page on my website, or you could also just reach out to me on LinkedIn. And with that, I think I can take questions if there are any.
Yes, thank you very much, Bob. Very interesting presentation. There were quite a few comments, and I learned from them that people typically do not get critical thinking courses in their college years and also not in their professional life. So most people indeed don't have a formal training on this topic of being a devil's advocate. A question by Jan Willem: should a devil's advocate have a different background to prevent the same biases as the other people in the team?
Yeah, this is a really interesting conundrum, right? Because I point out in the book as an example, if you're being brought in to do something very specific, let's suppose there's a new drug being developed and somebody wants to challenge the process that will be followed. Well, I certainly wouldn't be any help there. I don't understand drug delivery. But if you're in the business community, I think it would be okay to have a similar background, although I always advocate that people try to broaden their experience. I think we can all agree generally there's this T that they talk about. There are people who have deep knowledge, the experts in one field, and then there are people who have broad knowledge. And I think it's beneficial in devil's advocacy to have the broad knowledge. So you can say, oh, you know, I've seen this before. It's not in your industry, but I saw something like this in this other industry, and here's what they did for that. So I don't think it's precludes you from being a devil's advocate, but I think it's helpful if you have broad experience.
Okay. And another question by the Brazilian BA: could a trusted advisor play both the devil's and God's advocate role simultaneously? So it's like a bit of the connection or the tension between the two talks we have here.
Yeah, and in fact, this is another interesting point, I think. In my book, I refer to authoritatively addressing authority, right? So the devil's advocate has to be trusted. People have to feel as though they're not being cynical and trying to stop things. And so you have to sort of present your material in a way that shows your client that this is beneficial to you. You may not like to hear what I'm telling you, but this is beneficial. And so if the person, your client, believes you and they trust you, that's clearly the best place to be. So I think the advocate has to be a trusted advisor too. I think ideally you want management to say, look, I want you to come over here. I know this is going to be painful for people and you're going to encounter a lot of flack maybe, but I need you to come over here and take a look at this because I value your opinion.
Yeah. But I can imagine it takes a bit of time to build that trust, and you can't be, let's say, the negative person all the time.
Yeah, in fact, I know some people have pointed out that in some companies, they try to rotate the devil's advocate so they don't always see the same person coming into it. It's just that I advise people and do researchers. Researchers point out that if this is just done as theatrics, people are going to be very negative towards it. So whoever does this has to do it honestly. They have to be like an attorney, right? An attorney who's defending you may not know if you're actually guilty or not. In fact, oftentimes they don't want to know. Their job is to come up with the best case against the other case. And so likewise, I think whoever is going to take on the role of the devil's advocate has to make sure that they're doing it authentically. They're going to give it the best shot, even though they may ruffle feathers. And that's why the more people in the organization understand what devil's advocacy is, the less resistance they think you'll get, because they know you're not trying to hurt them. They understand it's a beneficial thing to the organization.
Yeah. And how can you measure the quality of your devil's advocacy? Because,
yeah, it's another interesting one. You know, there's one slide, if we have a moment, there's a slide I'd answer that question. might help answer that question.
Mhm.
Are you seeing my slides now?
Yes.
Okay, let me just go back here to where I need to be. Okay, and are you still seeing the slides?
We're
Do you
still
see
seeing
this?
the BA Beyond discounts.
Ah, okay, that's not the right slide. This is the problem we had earlier, I'm afraid. How about that?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, now it's
So do you
coming
see
up.
Okay, so this is something that I refer to. This is the pyramid of scientific evidence. You see this in science. This particular one is used in medicine. And so you'll see here the weakest evidence is at the bottom and the strongest is at the top. And so in medical trials, like the vaccines we're seeing, they need randomized controlled trials to make sure that what they're actually seeing, what they think they're seeing, they're actually seeing. And you'll notice at the very bottom of the quality of evidence is the expert opinion, which people sometimes shake their head about. But the reason this is so low is because it's just one person's opinion, no matter how skilled they are. The next one up are case reports, where you can give an example of something happening. And then finally, there's observational studies. But the reason I have this slide queued up is that in this question about how effective is it or what's the proof, we oftentimes have very low level of proof sources for this. We can't, for example, run a project using one process and then go back and run it again using the recommendations that a devil's advocate has made, right? It's really just a one and done. And so it's very difficult to demonstrate that this particular analysis led to a better outcome or not. Just like in poker, you're making that decision at this time with the best information you have, you may still lose the hand. So again, it's not to try to come up with the best answer. It's try to make sure that the judgment you've made is based in sound evidence, the best you have, and it's thought through well enough.
Okay. Another question that came up by Jan Willem, are there specific techniques such as abuse cases that you could use for playing the role of devil's advocate?
Well, there are examples, again, I give in the book where there have been devil's advocates in very high profile failures. For example, Theranos, you may know this company. This is the company that was going to do blood samples from the finger and everything would be done very quickly. And it turns out that whole company collapsed because they could never come up with the technology. The woman's being sued, the company's worthless, it was worth $9 billion. But in the history of that company, there were people that said, look, this can't work. And here's why. And people that said, there's something wrong with the way that they're presenting this information, and here's why. So there are examples where had the devil's advocates involved been listened to, you may have still ended up with maybe not the best product in the world, but you probably wouldn't have had that failure that you had before. And so again, it's somewhat subjective, because it's very difficult to prove unless you had gone back and actually taken advantage of those points. But common sense suggests that, had this, I think I listed 8 people in the book that challenged Theranos. Had any of them been listened to and somebody took a close look, they probably would have avoided that problem.
Okay. And then maybe one last question before, because I hear that Ravi is back online, so then we can hear the end of his talk as well. A last question by Bert: are people who are very new to the company typically good devil's advocates or just naive devil's advocates?
Well, that's funny. I think as far as the social network of the company go, they must be naive. Many years ago, I sold a business to a larger firm, and it was actually a former division of a company called Beckman. I don't even know if Beckman's around anymore. But one of the VPs said to me at the time, look, I want you to tell us whatever you think right now before you become Beckmanized. And what he meant was at some point, you're going to adopt the culture here. You're going to understand the politics. And we want to talk to you before any of that happens. So yeah, I think it's true that people coming into a company have a fresh vision. They may run into problems with the politics of the company. They don't know whose toes they might be stepping on and the like. And this is why, again, if the company already understands the benefits, they would be more gracious about any missteps that a new hire would make, because they would understand there's a benefit in having fresh eyes tell us what they're seeing that we're probably not seeing because we're too close to it.
Okay, thank you very much. So I now welcome again Ravi to the video stream to finalize your presentation and take a few questions, and then maybe we can take a few combined questions at the end if they appear.
Sorry, Philip, I talked myself for all through my presentation, then realized. So
it happens, no problem.
Can we move for a slide from this screen, or I have to go?
I think you were already beyond this slide.
Okay, so because when I go in full mode, I can't see you or anyone. That was. Can you stop me where I was?
Yeah, take it from here, the one before that.
I'm just trying to find a way that can I see you also and get the slide moving. So that's something like I have to go.
That really depends on your computer, but I will give you a signal when there's a question or anything.
Okay. So sorry about that kind of thing happened. So I will start from here, and what I'm trying to say here and pass a message here is that, like a plant to grow, you need a seeds, you need to take care of it with water, food, sunlight, taking care in the wet weather. Same like trust work. You need to put the seed of trust, particularly as a consultant or advisor, you're going in serving your client. You have to take the first step to put the seeds and trusting the client, trusting the people around, and it can become a reciprocal. So if you are not trusting, then things may not work for you, and you might leave that particular workplace. So similar to this, trust is kind of things grow. It doesn't come overnight. That's the message I like to pass over here. Some of the tips I want to highlight, which I have faced myself, and one of the caveat up front I'd like to say, the tips going to work only when you are really doing the work, when you're really trying to grow your trust, trying to build the relationship. That's where, so similar to like, you can't just learn swimming just sitting on the bank of the river, or you can't learn driving just sitting on the passenger seat. So keeping in that mind, so what worked for me, like first one, I will just highlight one. What worked for me about close assumptions sooner than later, because that thing many times happened with me, that I assume certain things, certain requirement or certain areas, and work on that. Most of the time, when you work in multi-location, multi-country environment, and client not have every hour you can contact them. So you have a limited time to interact with the client or customer. And so how best to develop that collaborative engagement, or can you keep more engagement that work for you, but try to resolve the assumption as soon as possible. Otherwise, both sides not happy, you're going to delay the time deadline and things like that. Another one I will pick about demonstrate the expertise and skill. That's what really worked for me, because when I was started doing consulting work and moved into totally new country, that was the only thing I have, that if I get a assignment and work, I have to prove with my style of working, with my delivery, whether I'm doing a workshop, whether I'm doing a meeting, whether I'm doing a training, or designing a customer journey, or writing the user stories or epics, whatever I'm doing, my work should tell, the value and the quality should tell that yes, I have the capability, I have the skill set about that. So that there are a number of things here. Given the time, like I won't go through this, but certainly these kind of things will work if you're keeping that mind while you're building relationship with your client or customer. Now, so far I had talked about different attributes, competency for trusted advisor, different perspective from people, diplomat from Ireland, James Saki, and scientist Giannis Pandey, and Charlie, the author, and the Ian Richard, who is a business analysis leader in the UK. What you have seen so far is what required and how best you can become, how best you can be in position to earn that level of relationship, trust base. Over here now, in a couple of slides, I'll talk about business analysis and business analyst. What need and what required to become a business analyst. And these two premium institutions, you might already know about them. They have been championing business analysis for last 2 decades and helping people to come on business analysis career path and learn and share and solve the business problem. And you can see that the definition and the competency required to become a very good competent business analyst is not far away, kind of almost same what you need to earn that status of trusted advisor. And everybody has their own definition. We all are business analysts. We know what we need to do. And few things I certainly would like to share as a business analyst what I have been doing and where I have been focusing. Like few things like we always go after the background, the context, where the client coming from, why this problem happened, why they want this kind of solution, what is in the background, what is the bigger picture. So that's always we focus on. Second thing, we do our investigating mind. We don't just stop till we find the root cause. We're not just happy with the symptoms and things, peripheral things. We go deep dive, define the real problem, and then define the real solution. Third thing we always try to do as a business analysis is getting the different perspective. Even in the same organization, if you're going to talk to an operational manager, they will say something else. If you're going to proposition manager, if you're going to talk to CTO, or if you get a chance to interact with the CEO, things will vary, a perspective will vary. So how be good at getting all those perspectives and then drawing a common perspective, or whether you're using a business activity diagram or whatever you want to draw out that, and so that you understood all side of perspective, which help you to not only solve the problem, to help build the solution which satisfy a wider set of stakeholders. Other thing we do, understand the need, real need, not like kind of I want this thing or that thing. It's really along line the real problem and solving that. So our skill set is work there, whether it's a need analysis or gap analysis. And then, of course, we help client and customer to embed the problem, whatever solution we come up with, whether it is a solution for people or solution, a technological solution or a structural change or behavior change, how we can handhold and take them to the journey and let's embed and inculcate the new environment, new solution. So that's what I'm trying to say, that our competency as a business analyst is kind of quite matching with them. Over here, I'm just trying to quickly say that normally in organization I have worked is you start as a junior BA or BA, focus on a very particular area. You may be working as a digital BA, you may be working as a process BA, you may be working on a legacy platform, or you might be just working on the proposition side or analytical side. So your kind of a scope is very little, one particular thing you focus. As you grow your competency as defined by BCS, IBA, or you learn in the organization, you have developed better competency on those skill sets and attribute. Your experience has gone with experience, with practicing those skill sets, you have been better and better. On other side, you gain the business knowledge, the relationship with all kind of business people around, whether they are in operation, whether they are executive level, or marketing side, whatever, or legal or compliance. You have a chance, and you have done that relationship, and you have built those relationships, develop your leadership skill, and then only you reach the level of senior BA or lead BA in your organization. And finally, I trying to join the dot is kind of a trusted advisor is not Philip, are you able still hearing me? I'm just trying to check.
Yes, no problem.
Okay. So please do note, because I'm just seeing my screen. So do note me so that I'm seeing that I'm there. So trusted advisor is a status, and that you can't buy it. You can't get a certification in it. This is something whoever you're serving, whether your client, your leadership, your boss, they need to confer you this, and you will. And as a lead BA, senior BA, you have all kind of attributes or competency to earn that. And that's why I'm trying to make a point that we are in the natural place as a working, having the experience of business analysis, and our mindset is such that problem solver. We are quite close to on that. Some some client will really there, some may not work, but certainly we are the right place to earn that position in mind of and in our relationship. Two things over here quickly I highlight, that problem solving and value delivery technique, these two are key for to earn the trust and having that level of relationship. And quickly on this each topic is on right needs a proper session. Even not one session, you have to read many months and practice many months and year to get inculcating this thing. But what I'm trying to make it, top two, system thinking and visual thinking, help you to gain the better picture, to deep dive the problem, if you inculcating and learning this skill, it helps you to get on the problem, to get on the root cause quickly, visualizing the problem. You might have a different thought process in your mind. If you're quick drawing and quick doing some sort of chart or and process flow diagram, data flow diagram, whatever you do, then like tomorrow you can draw something else, and finally you're trying to get a better picture. So those two things, certainly, if you have and if you can make better on these techniques, then it helps you to certainly define the problem and help you the way to find a solution for the problem. Other two things are more focused on the client value delivery and how we take client give a client focus of our thought process, whatever we do, whether we do a customer journey or we designing a solution. We're not just posting about our product and solution when we are selling to the client, but we really need to understand their need and change, customize our product in that way that it's really serve the purpose. And lean thinking, where you always have seen that you must have gone through, what it is about. And for me, it is about a continuous improvement. How better we can do as a business analyst, whatever I am doing, whether I'm writing an email, whether I have to make a half-an-hour presentation, whether I have got only 5 minutes to talk, whether I have to get how I can make myself very effective and drive the value in shorter time. Because as a consultant, we always find not much time to directly dealing with a client or key customer partner. We always run out of time. So ourselves having efficient and using taking time as a essence of the time, understanding that and prepare ourselves that we can deliver pass the message, the right message, and right definition to the client or customer even a short period of time. And always think about what we can do better to remove any non-productive thing. Some of the technique what I have highlighted here, I have been using, not every day I use, but that's the thing I have learned in different conferences and in different courses I have done, and I tried my best to get it better on this, and that's certainly helping me. One thing always people ask, like, how I know that I have been trusted or how I can measure it. And that question was always in my mind as well. But there is no right, any device or things which you can use and measure it. But there is a validation. There are sense check you can do. If these kind of things, what I am showing on the slide, if these things are happening with you, that means yes, you are on the right direction. If client is reaching out to you for advice frequently, if they are taking you to complex and advanced problem solving and taking you to vendor, taking to your regulator. One example I give you, that when I was working with HSBC and working on PSDU on regulatory program, and after a certain time, a client was happy to me to take in the meeting with the regulator monthly meeting, where we discussed problem, try to understand. I was not talking much, but at least client took me there so that I can prepare the solution or direction we can give, which direction we are moving. So they will reward you, pat you on the back, they will talk about you in the meeting, bigger meeting, anywhere, recognize you, even they take you in the personal table or professional table, wherever they're doing some sort of gathering. All these things, if you're happening, that yes, you are on the right direction. So I just like to share a few my personal moment of trust validation. As I mentioned earlier, that I started consulting 2010. I was struggling for fewer, but then come 2012, where I was working with my client Barclays, and they awarded me for this, and they trusted me. I got a in a frame of that point of time CEO Ashok Baswani. That was a quite humble moment for me. Next year, they took me this award ceremony where I was part of the program, where that program won 2 industry awards, and that showed me that yes, I am in the right direction, and client does trust me, and they're giving me repetitive business. Couple of more moments. One was in 2017 when I was accepted as a speaker in Sofia. I had talked about audience analysis there. And then, not the last, last but not the least, becoming a finalist of the Business Analyst of the Year 2019. And that would not have been possible without my client that point of time, HSBC recommendation, and the work they give me a program level lead BA role on the PSD2 program, and that's my presentation. So that really helped me. The client giving me recommendation and letting me to handle a big piece of work, that so that understand for me a sense check that yes, client is trusting me and I'm developing that kind of relationship. Now, I'm just trying to conclude quickly. Business analyst and trusted advisor. It's if you go through definition, you go through the key attributes and competency is kind of a business analyst is always there. You always have those kind of competency if you are a very good and competent business analyst. But three things overall summarizing, I like to conclude that as long as you're giving effective advice, and what I mean by effective is client is taking your advice, believing in your advice, and they're able to understand your advice. So whatever way you can do, you visualize them, you get a better presentation, you prototype them, give them a quick benefit, whatever it takes to believe client, getting client believing your advice. That's kind of a effectiveness I'm talking about. Second point is, as usual, we as a business analyst, we need to keep solving the problem, not lingering the problem. Keep the problem, move one problem to another problem, and taking away the client's worries and pain. The one thing certainly every client wants from consultant is, have you taken their day-to-day hassle problem and you deal with it? You don't go client often that this is a problem. You taking charge, take the charge to solve the problem and give the client good news. Yes, there was something which is solved, not like always running with all the kind of a problem. Third thing is about building relationship to serve, and that's where saying that the client will sense it, that you are trying to come close and build that relationship, the comfort level, giving the client where client can be open. You should be in a sense that they should sense that this is just to serve them and in this area of concern, because we have this relationship for this many months. I need to be close enough with you to understand, and you able to close enough me to tell about me the whole detail, whole story of the problem. So that's kind of I mean to say that when you building relationships to serve. So like going socializing is a very good thing, and going for dinner, talk, and another conference together, that help you. But no point you should be kind of a deviating and going to your personal agenda. It's always has to be that you are there to serve the client. So that's all I had to say, and thank you very much, Philip. That's all I had to say. I'm ready for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ravi. Let me run through a few of the questions. May credibility come from a professional certificate? What's your experience in that domain?
Can you repeat your question? Sorry.
So can trust and credibility come from a professional certificate?
So that is like, if you recall my talk 4 point from Charlie Green also, that gives an element of trust that will certainly give you, seems to be trusted. Okay, if the client has to choose two people, then your qualification will come as a kind of okay, let's call this guy also to evaluation. So certification work that kind of to get you at least a talking point, to get you, okay, come and I talk to you. So that way it will work. It won't certification once you are in, your work, your delivery should work, what you do, what better quality you deliver. But certainly certification work, because for me it worked, as I was mentioning, when I started consulting 2010 and 12 I got my diploma in business analysis, 13 I got CBAP. That did allow me people giving me trust. This guy is serious about business analysis. He not only know, so that helped, but that is just to get you in the door and get you the interview level or table to talk. But it won't, it won't more than that. It won't help you more than that. Okay. I hope that answered the question.
I think so, and otherwise our Brazilian BA, Fabrizio, will definitely come back to the chat. Another question from Fabrizio, could we say that trust would be higher if the advisor's interests are aligned with the client's interests?
So yes, so if both interests are together, I can't say it's higher, because this is the way that it is like, it is kind of you are as a consultant serving, the client has to trust you, and if both interests align, that's a good thing to happen. Otherwise you have to align, because I'm going to serve, I have to keep my personal interest away. But if I'm representing organization, certainly our interest is there. But the foremost, we have to keep the client interest in the focus to solve them. that will become a more long lasting. If you are stick to your interest, and if client wanting something else, then the relation is not going to work. Some down the line somewhere, there would be a crack.
Okay. And then another question, can a junior or a senior BA also be a trusted advisor? In your diagram, you mentioned that we grow towards being a trusted advisor ultimately. Could a junior or senior BA also be a trusted advisor?
So with that diagram, I was just trying to draw a picture that, when you become really a senior BA, lead BA, you have so much competency. You have worked on your competency, all the attributes and skill set, and you have practiced so many years. So certainly you are like, better position. If I have to go and talk to senior leadership, I have got only 1 hour to prepare a one-pager slide. If I have that skill set, I won't panic. Okay, I got half an hour, I have to get ready. So that a skill set you got there to deal. But what I'm saying that even you are junior BA, you working, because your area of concern, area of relationship is not that big. As a BA, you deal with lots of technology people. As a junior level, you deal with the process people. So whatever you need to make sure that they trust you, and how you can become a go-to person for those people, whatever folks you deal with as a capacity of junior BA. You may not be directly talking to senior manager, you may not be directly talking to marketing manager, but you would be talking whoever you're talking. Can your lead BA trusting you enough to give you a chance to, okay, go in place of me? Can you deal with that particular workshop? Can you handle that? And that's how you learn. It happened with me. I was kind of got number of time I got that kind of a chance where my lead BA, okay, can you whatever reason I'm not, and go and work there, and you show your caliber. So you get opportunity to show and sign. At the same time, whatever people you deal with, you have to earn their trust. So that is working, like, you're developing and earning the trust. Whatever people you deal with, then when you get a chance to directly deal with a client and customer and their representative, it will work for you. So it is not that whatever you're doing, it is just happen to be a lead BA, senior BA at your level, whatever your area of influence, you need to work on that.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers.
Another question by Jan Willem: how to single problems and take away worries at the same time?
Yeah, so solving problem, like, as whatever you do deep dive, you're trying to define the problem with, individually or group of people, as a team you're working. So and take worries and pain is giving the client and customer for who you solving the problem that kind of comfort level, that the baby is in a safe hand, the problem is in a safe hand, and you are not unnecessarily bothering client. This happened, and that problem doesn't work, we need to escalate. How you better handle, take the responsibility, take that leadership that, yes, I'm in charge here, I won't bother client, I will try my best to solve, and always try to give some good news rather than bad news. So if I'm dealing with technology, something, okay, problem happened, some report is not working and things, first thing, I won't go back and tell my client first. I will try to understand, solve the problem. If problem is solved, it's really critical and it has to reach. So if I can show that kind of leadership, and that's what I mean, that kind of, you're keeping that worries, day-to-day things, and out of kind of a not bothering client on that basis. I hope I answered that question, what I meant by that.
I think so, and people can, of course, always get back to you in the networking area during the breaks for more questions.
Yes, sure.
It makes me think of something that Delvin Fletcher, IIBA CEO, said not so long ago. As a BA, we often bring a lot of complexities to the table, which is relevant, which is important, but which sometimes feels like we're complicating things. And we should also be simplifiers. And that will help us, I think, also gain that trust. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Ravi, and thank you very much, Bob, for your interesting talks. We have a few minutes for people to refill their coffee and then head over to the intermezzo sessions by Peter and by Jenno. So I invite everyone to join in on those sessions at 2:45 CET, that is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.